Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar, and other people can catch up. Pam, you can take a look at the chat as it comes across.
Okay.
So good morning and welcome to today's webinar on recruiting, hiring, and onboarding employees. My name is Jim Danhauser. I'm a volunteer with SCORE. I wanted to cover just a few introductory items before I turn things over to our facilitator for today, my colleague and friend, Pam Sanday. You see listed on this slide the organizations that provide assistance to SCORE in presenting this webinar. We're supported by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Chambers of Commerce located in towns throughout Cape Cod and the islands, and the Community Development Partnership in Eastham. And as always, we're very grateful to these organizations for their ongoing support of our educational efforts. For those of you who aren't familiar with SCORE, we're a fully volunteer nonprofit organization and a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. We've been doing this work since our founding in 1964 through educational opportunities like this webinar, as well as by providing mentoring to people who are in business or who are thinking about starting a business. We benefit from having more than 50 volunteer mentors and subject matter experts in our chapter here on Cape Cod and the islands, people with a broad array of different career experiences and expertise. So if you'd like to avail yourself of these mentoring services, all of which comes completely free and is absolutely confidential, you can call the SCORE office in Hyannis at 508-775-4884, or go online to www.capecod.score.org to get started by clicking the Find a Mentor tab. I also know that some of you on today's webinar come from other SCORE chapters in our district, a district that covers all of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Mentors and subject matter experts in each of those chapters are similarly ready to provide mentoring assistance to you. You see on the slide the websites for those organizations, those chapters. You can access assistance through those websites, and I will post those later in the chat function as well. You'll also see a reference to Coastal Community Capital. They are a non-traditional lending organization based here on the Cape, licensed to do business throughout the state of Massachusetts. And we at the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE often work together with Coastal, helping to flesh out their clients' business plans, and just as importantly, helping our clients to better understand the full range of financing that may be available to them. We'd encourage you to reach out to Coastal to discuss any financing needs that you might have. Last preliminary is today's procedures. All participants other than myself and Pam Sanday have been muted. We ask that you enter any questions or comments that you might have into the Q&A feature. You can use the button for that you should see at the bottom of your screen. Please don't enter them into the chat. I'll be monitoring questions as they come in during the course of Pam's discussion, and it's just easier to follow one box as opposed to having to toggle back and forth. We will answer as many questions as we can during and after the presentation, and if you have any questions that we don't reach, you can feel to reach out to me, and I'll give you my email address. That's jim.danhauser@scorevolunteer.org. And I will get those questions on to Pam. The webinar is being recorded. We will send a link to that recording to all registrants as soon as it's available. And just before the end of the session, I will launch a poll, which will just be seeking information about your reaction to the presentation and the discussion. It simply helps us better organize our educational efforts and to make sure that we are in fact addressing the needs and desires of the small business community that we seek to serve. So with all of that, I'll now turn things over to my friend and colleague, our facilitator for today, Pam Sanday. Pam?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here And this is quite a topic and quite a challenging topic these days in this labor market. And Jim, I'll just cue you to go to the next slide here.
Okay.
All right. So as you know, described, you see all the we're hiring signs here. Hiring is definitely a major, challenge for small businesses. It's a major challenge for here on the Cape Cod and the islands as well. The webinar covers, trends and best practices for finding and hiring top talent. And we're going to talk today about sourcing candidates, creating job postings, screening, interviewing, onboarding, etc. Go to the next slide. We're going to start with talking about some current trends and how this impacts your business. And then I'll talk about a strategic roadmap that we use for finding and keeping employees. So you'll notice that I say finding and keeping, because today it's not only about finding them, it's about how you keep them. And that will include a roadmap that is starts with developing your marketing strategy, sourcing, screening and interviewing, selecting candidates for hire, and then onboarding and continuously engaging them in order to retain. Next slide. So let's talk about current trends. And we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about these because I think it's very important in terms of when you're developing your strategy for hiring and retaining to really understand what's going on in the workforce. So according to Willis Towers Watson's 2021 Talent Attraction and Retention Survey, they are predicting, based on the survey results, that the challenges in attracting and retaining employees are going to continue well into 2022. I've even been hearing it could continue well, into 2023. And so you have to say, well, what's behind that, right? So first of all, the demand for labor has increased. Organizations simply are hiring more people. You've got employees that are, who have been out, a lot of them out based on all that's been happening the last couple of years around COVID, that are delaying coming back to work due to unemployment, childcare, elder care responsibilities. Childcare, huge issue right here on the Cape, by the way. And or, fear of coming back to work because they're afraid of getting COVID. And then there's also greater wage expectations. So those looking for jobs are demanding higher pay. And by the way, they're getting it in order, many businesses, in order to be able to run their business, have had to pay some higher wages. So what types of workers are the most challenging to find and retain? And it's really, these are the top four, categories that you see in this box at the top right. The most challenging, employees with digital skills. In terms of the survey response, 78% are having challenges with attracting them. 63% are having challenges with retaining them. And then you've got hourly workers. Okay, we have a lot of hourly workers here on the Cape. Based on this survey, 61% are having challenges attracting them and 58% challenges with retaining them. And by the way, with regard to hourly workers, one of the things that I'll just point out too is if you can set up your retention strategy to keep them for over a year, you're more likely to meet it. But some people are losing hourly workers even as short as within the first 3 months of hire. So that's why retaining really has to be part of your strategy. Production warehouse workers, 62% attracting, challenges attracting, 60% with retaining. And look here, hospitality restaurant workers, again, big employment market here on the Cape. 57% challenges with attracting and 56% with retaining. Another interesting thing that you want to pay attention to is the Bureau of Labor Statistics for Massachusetts. So for September 2021, the hiring rate was 4.1%. What that translates to is in Massachusetts, we hired 143,000 employees in September. The quits rate, though, is 2.8%. So 99,000 people quit their jobs. They may have quit to go to another job or, quit for other reasons, but 99,000 quit. And then you have your job openings rate. So look at that, 8.1%. There are 309,000 job openings in September. And then you look at, the hiring rate, the quits rate. I mean, there are more job openings than you can fill. And then the unemployment rate is running 5.2%. So all that, the combination of, what's going on, behind the scenes in terms of making hiring very challenging. Another trend I'm sure everyone's been hearing about is the Great Resignation. What that's about is employees are quitting their jobs in record numbers. And this trend is referred to as the Great Resignation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that on average, 3.8 million workers across the US are quitting their jobs every month. And in October, 3.5 million left their jobs voluntarily in October. So it's important to really understand, again, from a retention strategy perspective, what the reasons are behind that, the real reasons why employees are quitting. So one is, as we already talked about, the labor market conditions. You've got a historic number of job openings combined with low unemployment rates. And so that makes for a challenging labor market under any circumstances, that combo. But there's also other reasons here. One is compensation. Employees can get jobs today that pay more than their current job. So, and here, when you're talking about particularly like lower wage positions, employees are willing a lot of times to move for a job to get $1 an hour more of pay. And then when you talk about, sign-on bonuses that have been going on these days too. So there are reasons. Comp is a big part of this. Career development and progression. Employees, can now, with the job openings at hand, have more opportunity, to take a job that provides for a promotion or for a career change. Some are looking for better work-life balance. Some are leaving because they don't like their managers. Some are leaving for better work schedules or the flexibility to work remote. And some are deciding to retire. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of HR people, and a couple of people said, I'm retiring. I mean, they're just worn out, from the last couple of years, and they fortunately have the means to do so, or so are choosing to retire. The other thing to understand is that the workforce today is transforming. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the 2020 Deloitte Global Human Capital Survey, they did this survey and 53% of the respondents said that 50 to 100% of their workforce will have to acquire, okay, this is the challenges of working remote here. Pardon my dog in the background. Are going to need to acquire new skills and capabilities in the next 3 years. And the competition has increased to fill the new roles while retaining employees. This is going to require organizations to invest in development and shift from acquiring talent or hiring to creating talent, which means developing people already in your organization to take on new jobs and new roles. So that's something to think about a little bit more longer term, but we're seeing that, based on these trends, how difficult it is to find people. Another thing that's happening is just organizations today are, it's a rapidly moving market. Jobs are dynamic. Skills, responsibilities, are shifting. And it's really going to come down to a business's success is going to depend on its capacity to build a workforce or staff in which everyone has the skills and behaviors they need to succeed amidst a shifting landscape. So that's trends. So what is this? How does this impact your business? Well, in today's labor market, we used to have an expression about post and pray. You develop a job posting, you post it on, the usual websites, and then you hope that you'll find the right people. Well, I got to say, this is just not going to be a winning strategy anymore. Okay. So today's challenges really require that you have a robust marketing strategy for finding, or what we call sourcing, top candidates, along with a comprehensive strategy for keeping them once hired. And so the roadmap that we're going to talk about today focuses on both of those ends. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the strategic roadmap. Okay, so this roadmap consists of really 5 major elements for successfully finding and keeping employees. The first is your marketing strategy, then sourcing, and then screening, interviewing, and evaluating candidates, and then selecting candidates for hire and offering the job, and then onboarding and continuously engage employees, for retention purposes. So we're going to tackle each one of those, starting with the marketing strategy. So what are the best practices for developing a marketing strategy? Well, number one, if you have a marketing person, please do partner with them. And that marketing person may be an internal person or an external person. But if you can, it may benefit you to really partner with them to develop your strategy. Start with, or another possibility, Jim, I would think would be if they wanted to have a marketing mentor through SCORE, right?
Absolutely. We have a lot of people who are in a position to help with that.
That's great. And by the way, I was a SCORE client, and that's why I went to SCORE, was to have them help me with marketing. While I know a lot about human resources, when I started my business back in 2016, I didn't have a clue about how to market. So SCORE was very helpful in that regard. So that might be something that you can talk about with some of the marketing people there. You want to start with focusing on what I'll call your company brand to identify, and that's a typo there, sorry about that, to identify what about your brand people you want to hire would find attractive and of interest, okay? And from that, you want to create your employee value proposition, or EVP messages. And I'll give you a couple of examples what I mean. You might have an organization, say a nonprofit, where people feel a very strong connection to your mission. Well, lots of employees or candidates today are looking to not even necessarily make more money. They're looking for an organization where they feel like they can make a contribution, so that would be, part of the employee value proposition. Also, people are looking for a great culture in which to work, some, team oriented or maybe fun and inclusive. And I'm reminded of an organization here on the Cape that sells ice cream. And one of the ways they keep people that they hire, this is a seasonal business, but they keep them coming back for multiple seasons because they really make it fun to work there. Another is, whether you have an inclusive, kind of organization, or whether you provide the opportunity to grow and progress in their career, or maybe it's you pay very competitive pay or benefits, or offer flexible work schedules or the ability to work remote. Whatever that is, part of your marketing strategy, you need to understand and be able to point out what is going to be valuable to people who want to work for your organization. Another thing I strongly recommend, please do check the internet. For example, Google, Glassdoor, Indeed, Yelp, Bolt, Career Bliss, and others for reviews on your business, and especially reviews by employees, and do respond to them. And it's important that you know what those reviews are. And one of the reasons why is people today, candidates for jobs today, they go out and they research. And one of the things they really, really want to research is to find out what your employees say about working in your organization. So that's really important. Another thing you can do if you have employees or some staff, I should have asked all of you how many employees you have in your business. Can we get a quick response to that?
So people can put into the chat how many employees they have. You don't have to put that in the Q&A box, put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So one of the things you can do for those of you who have, some employees is to ask them for endorsements on working for your company, and that's a great way, to kind of attract, and source candidates as well. And then you want to create your marketing campaign for sourcing candidates. And we're going to talk about that in depth very shortly. Go to the next slide. In addition, you want to prepare to answer candidate questions about the job, your culture, what you're going to pay, benefits and career growth, and any other thing that it would be part of that, employee value proposition. I've seen also organizations prepare really well-designed handout describing some of this. For example, benefits at a glance, or other handouts that they can give to people that they bring in for interviews. So that's another way to get that important information across.
So Pam, you'll see in the chat that we've got people saying they've got 3, 7, 5, 2 of whom are part-time.
Yeah.
So people do have existing employees.
Excellent. Cool. So lean on them to help. And we'll talk about ways you can do that. Right. The other thing you want to think about as part of your marketing strategy as well is whether you want to use incentives to attract candidates. For example, sign-on bonuses. I assume everybody has heard about sign-on bonuses that are going on today. I mean, people are offering, if we hire you, we'll pay you, we'll give you a $500 or $1,000, sign-on bonuses. I see that going on a lot in healthcare kind of industry as well as retail. And what I would say is consider it, but you also want to really consider the pros and cons of doing so. For example, one con is, you could have people come to work for you for the bonus, and let's say you pay it out after 90 days, and then they've collected the bonus and then they move on. Because other organizations are hiring and will pay a sign-on bonus. Another con of doing so is paying sign-on bonuses to new hires, but your existing staff are not getting any dollars. So there are ways to kind of think about that. For example, maybe having an employee referral program, or even thinking about retention bonuses if you're losing staff. And then finally, as part of your marketing strategy as well, you want to write very compelling job postings for use in marketing campaigns. And we'll talk a lot about that in just a minute as well. Okay. All right. So as I said, sourcing starts really with writing that job posting for use in your marketing campaign. And the intent of a job posting is to summarize, the job responsibilities and requirements and to market the job. So I'm going to say a job posting is not a job description. There's a very big distinction between the two. A job description is more like a legal document that describes the job in detail, requirements, a lot of times also mental, physical, effort, as well as work environment, and all the stuff that's connected with ADA. So that's not what you want to post, all right? You don't want to post that kind of document. You want to post, a job posting, again, that's compelling. It makes the job interesting to the type of candidate that you're trying to attract. So some best practices for writing a job posting. First of all, use a job title that's recognizable. All right, so when you think about these postings, regardless of where you post it, if it's got a job title that doesn't mean anything to somebody, they may not even read the job posting. So even if you use a different title internally, make sure the job title that you're advertising, is going to be recognizable. You also want to include language in the job posting that enforces the employee value proposition, and that would attract the type of candidates that you want to attract. So for example, if you're a nonprofit, that provides services for seniors, you might write something like, even in the first line of the posting, if you want to make a difference in people's lives, come join us at ABC nonprofit company as an elder care specialist, something that would, really attract them. A retail store, maybe that has, career paths or, things like that. They might write something in the job posting that talks about opportunity to develop and grow in your career. Or, maybe they provide, very competitive pay and benefits, so they could include that. So those are the kinds of things that you want to think about. You also want to provide details. So you want the job posting to be detailed enough for people to understand what the job is, and, the employee value proposition. But if possible, you also want to keep that word count down to no more than 1,200 words so that people really read it. Post the job also with keywords used for job searches. So you might want to include alternate job titles, whether the job is part-time, where the job is located, whether remote, etc. In addition, also important to include a short description of your company. People today want to know what kind of company it is, and they're comparing offers that they get, from your company, up against other companies. So you want to make it really, again, a good description. And I would also highlight your mission, as this helps people, determine whether they are the right, fit for the job. You also want to use active verbs and descriptive language rather than passive language. It just makes the job posting more exciting, to read. Avoid using third-person language, such as, and I see this phrase all the time in job postings, the ideal candidate will blah, 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 right? Don't use that, and that's third person. Use, you and we, make it more personal. And then you also want to demonstrate your company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. And I think that that's important today in order to really, have increased the size of your of those that are the pool, the talent pool. So here on this slide, sourcing candidates today, as I said, really requires a comprehensive marketing strategy. What this graphic upside down pyramid really shows is, or intended to show, is the recruitment funnel. And so really I guess at a high level here, the more you can attract to that awareness of your job, the more, the higher your chances are for hiring a highly qualified employee for the job. So it all starts with those first three levels: awareness, consideration, and interest. Is all about, marketing and recruiting, making people aware of the job enough so that they even consider it and maybe even find it of interest. And then the last parts of that pyramid, you've whittled it down. You're looking at applications, you're evaluating, people that have sent resumes, and then ultimately hiring. Now, what are some ideas for increasing your pool of candidates? So first of all, I already mentioned, implementing an employee referral program. The reason why employee referral programs really work is when you have employees, they understand, know your business, know your culture, and have therefore a good idea of the kind of people that would fit, in your organization. Not to mention, they wouldn't want to bring somebody that didn't work out, because that would be, probably not a desired result for them. And organizations that set up employee referral programs, it might be, for someone who is hired, and sometimes there's a clause, and successfully completes a 90-day orientation type period. They would pay out a bonus of, $250 all the way up to, I've seen as high as $1,000, really depending on the position and the organization. It's a great way for them being able to, not only make some extra cash, but also a great way for you to get, very good candidates. So highly recommend. Some organizations structure it so they get the referral, maybe one piece of the referral bonus, after 90 days, and a second payout after 6 months. I would not recommend doing that. I think it's 6 months is a long time. And, especially in today's market, you want to make it as, attractive as possible to make referrals. The other thing is you, of course, want to, continue to post jobs on external job sites like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, to name a couple. You also want to post jobs on social media sites. That is really, really important. And highly recommend the top 3 that are used for that: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You really, really want to leverage those social media sites. You also want to expand social media reach by asking employees to share job openings, on their personal social media sites. And that's great, particularly if you have, for example, employees that belong to, on LinkedIn, groups that relate to their job. It's a great way that you can expand. According to LinkedIn, organizations can expand their talent pool by 10 times by recruiting through employees' networks. So highly recommend you do that. I have a client now who's actually even considering paying a smaller bonus than you would for an employee referral program, but combined with their employee referral program, considering paying people to for any candidates or applicants that come in through someone's social media page, a small bonus. So that would be another idea. You also want to post jobs on your own business website. Now, if you don't have a career page, set up, another thing that you can do is maybe still post a career page. Usually allows the applicant to apply for the job right on the page. So if that's not set up on your website, what you can do is still post the job, but have them maybe set up through your email, a special email box, for example, HR at, whatever your company name is, .com or .org. Or you might use something like join at, and so that all the, just ask them to send their resume to, that email box. And then it's all collected in one place. You can consider another idea is, missed this bullet, another idea is to post jobs on professional association websites. So for example, in HR, we would always post New England HR Association. If it's in a technical kind of job, maybe you look for like an engineering professional association. So check out those as well. You can consider target marketing. For example, tapping into veterans, retirees, working mothers, people with diverse backgrounds, and others. One client I know of was looking for direct care staff. And one of the things they did is they targeted posting their jobs at many of the local churches. And got some good candidates that way. Also, you use your connections or any connections that you have with college programs, to market jobs. And other ideas include, conducting special "we're hiring" email campaigns. So if you have, maybe for marketing purposes, if you have, email lists that you use, maybe with Constant Contact or something like that, create, a one-pager, kind of thing, "we're hiring" and the positions that you're hiring for, and, some information, to attract them. Another idea, if you've had some former employees that were great, do a "we want you back" mailing. And that's, has produced some results for some as well. And then, as I'm sure you've seen all along, if you're driving along Route 132, Ivana Road, all of the "we're hiring" signage, using that signage in high traffic areas also can have results. And then finally, job fairs. So there are job fairs that have been, some of them live that you can participate in. But you can also participate in virtual job fairs these days. And you may find some candidates that way. Okay, so let's talk about, now you've got all your marketing out there. You're starting to get in some resumes and that kind of thing, or job applications. So screening starts with screening both the resume and job application against the job posting. And the best practice is to always have qualified applicants complete a job application. The reason for that is a resume, a job application is a legal document that includes important language around at-will employment. It includes language that you're required to provide when someone's filling out, like we don't require polygraph testing, that they're acknowledging or that or attesting, that they are have completed the application to the best of their knowledge, that kind of thing. Some of our clients don't have everybody that, for example, we would not recommend having every person that sends you a resume through Indeed complete a job application. What we do recommend, because they're at that point not really selected as an applicant or a candidate. What we recommend is at least have people complete an application if you decide to bring them in for an interview. I think that would be really important. At that point, if you're just doing the resume, that would be okay. But they should complete a job application if you're going to interview. You also want to make sure, please do not write any notes or comments on the resume or the job application. And this is to protect the interviewer from claims of discrimination or personal bias. They can make their notes on a separate sheet of paper, so don't write it on that because those things go into the file. You want to, when you're screening them, look for red flags. So the things that we typically look for, are there any gaps in employment? Does the resume show that the person is hopping around a lot or made, frequent career changes? If there's a, considerable job history, has there been a lack of career growth or advancement? You also want to look for, you might think this is odd, but grammatical spelling or formatting errors, because if there's a lot of that, that may signify someone that, for example, doesn't have a lot of attention to detail, Now, just a note about gaps here. Sometimes there are very valid reasons for gaps or frequent job changes. But one way that you can address that is by conducting a phone screen. And valid reasons might be someone took off time, to a year to raise a child, or a newborn, or, that kind of thing. Or frequent job changes. They're the spouse of someone in the military and they move around a lot. So those could be, some things about why they would be valid. So let's talk about phone screens. The purpose of a phone screen interview is to really determine whether someone should be scheduled for a more in-depth interview or be screened out. And that practice can save you a lot of time and money. So highly recommend phone screening. Another thing that phone screening does when it goes well is you get a sense of someone's communication skills, competency, professionalism, level of interest. So that's important, and that will help you identify the circumstances also, as I said, behind any gaps or red flags on your resume. Another thing we often use phone screens for as well when working with clients is, although the recommendation is to always post the pay range, that you're hiring in, we have a lot of clients that don't want to post that, and for good reasons. One, it's sensitive, and may be a problem, to display that up against, current employees. It could also be that you don't want to post the pay range to give you flexibility, to actually pay more than maybe you want to be paying just to compete, with a really top qualified, for a top qualified candidate. And so you can use the phone screen to say, one of the questions you can ask is, what are your salary expectations? By the way, you cannot ask how much they're currently paying or for a salary history, because that would violate the Massachusetts pay equity law. But you can ask, what are your salary expectations? You might hear back from them saying, I'm flexible, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, they're flexible. And then at that point, you want to say, well, let me tell you, the pay range for this job is X to X. Does that pay range work for you? So you can get into a little bit of a dialogue on that. Good questions, to ask during a phone screen might include, why are you interested in the job? Why are you interested in working for our company? And hopefully they'd be able to really talk about that one, because that really shows whether they did your homework about them and their level of interest in your company. It's always good to ask why you're leaving or why are you considering leaving your current position. Another good question is, what qualifies you for this position? And again, that's a little bit of, not only talking about their level and credentials, but a little bit about their, interest in the position too. And what are you looking for, in your next role? What will be your greatest challenge? What type of environment, or culture is best for you? If offered the position, how soon would you be able to start? And there may be other questions that you want to ask as well during a phone screen. Okay, so let's say you get through the phone screen. Now you want to, interview them. And by the way, some interviews I'm finding these days, many people are doing a first interview via Zoom or other, in light of COVID, and particularly recently because of, the new variant that's out and all that. And then they might, for a second interview, want to do that one in person, but certainly making sure, that you're observing, mask and, things like that. Another thing, well, I'm digressing a little bit. Another thing that you may want to consider too, when setting up the interview, if you're an organization that requires everybody to be fully vaccinated, that would be a good time to make sure that they understand that. And by the way, that's also something that you may even want to include in your job posting to make sure if you're requiring people to, be fully vaccinated, get that out there out front. And some even talk about, what their other requirements are around COVID. I just thought I would interject that just so you're aware. So best practices, for interviewing candidates. This is so important. Conduct what we call structured interviews. What this means is you want to think about in advance what questions you're going to ask. And then you want to structure those questions in a way and ask those same questions of every candidate that you interview for the same job. This allows you to better compare and contrast candidates, and B, helps you avoid the risk of discrimination claims. So very, very important, use structured interviews. When interviewing, we always say, use the 80-20 rule, okay? And what that means is you want the candidate, and by having a structured interview, you want to make it so that the candidate is doing 80% of the talking and you only 20%. And I've had clients where, I'm thinking of one CEO that I've worked with who did 90% of the talking and then only the candidate only had 10% of the talking. And he couldn't believe when he switched to this, how much more he learned about, the candidate from just following that rule. So anyway, and the more you know about the candidate, then the more you learn about whether they are a good fit for your organization. It's also important to know what questions you can and cannot ask legally. And then as part of this structured interview, it's good to ask not only general questions, but also what we call behavioral and situational questions related to what it takes for a person to be successful in your job. General questions are, typically closed-ended questions and factual, yes or no, or, that kind of thing. Behavioral questions are open-ended and can't be answered with simple yes or no. Basically, what you're asking are questions about someone's past experiences and behaviors, which are a very good predictor for a candidate's strengths and areas for improvements. And it gives you a good read into how they will behave in your position. Situational questions, a little bit of different twist. That's to ask the candidate how they would handle a hypothetical scenario. And maybe the hypothetical scenario is something similar to what would happen in your organization. You want to get an idea how they would handle that. So they're a good predictor also of the candidate's decision-making abilities. So I'm going to talk about each of these, types of questions to consider. And by the way, you really want most of the interview questions to be either behavioral or situational, with general questions more at the beginning, and some of them just designed to even make the candidate feel comfortable. Examples of general questions include, are you willing to work weekends? What new programs have you implemented at your current job? What software applications have you used? Again, just very, general, factual. Behavioral-based questions, start with open-ended phrases like, tell me about a time when. What you're really looking for is to get the candidate to talk about examples of how they did their work in a previous job. So you might say, give me an example of, or describe a situation when. Some sample behavioral questions include, tell me about a time when you had to deal with an irate customer. What did you do? What was the outcome? Tell me about an employee who became more successful as a result of your management. Or tell me about a time when you planned and executed a complex assignment. Or give me an example when you helped increase sales. What did you do? What was the result? Describe a situation when you were overwhelmed with more work than you could handle. What did you do to ensure that work would be done? Or give me examples of specific strengths you bring to this position. Or describe a situation that illustrates how well you manage multiple projects at one time. So you could just, again, what you want to, in terms of the behavioral questions, really make them related to the job that you're trying to hire for. Okay. Situational questions, they usually start with realistic scenarios and start with what would you do if, or how would you solve the following, or how would you handle the following. So sample situational questions. You're in an elevator, two employees are discussing a co-worker's medical condition. What would you do? You've passed the deadline for an important project and need more time. What would you do? If you were suddenly promoted to a management position, how would you ensure that you would receive the proper training and mentoring? Your team has completed a project with excellent results. How would you reward them? Your company's technology is out of date. Your boss doesn't want to discuss it. How would you handle that situation? So those are all examples. Here are some questions to avoid. Don't ask, are you a US citizen? But you can ask, are you authorized to work in the US? And some organizations will ask that question, are you authorized to work in the US, even as part of a pre-screening questions on some of the job sites. So that might be a good one to include. You can't ask whether they have a disability. Some of these are pretty obvious that you shouldn't ask, I hope. But you can ask, can they perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation? You cannot ask someone who why they've been discharged from the service, but you can ask a veteran about the duties performed, training, any work experience in the military, but just not why they were discharged. Stay away from any questions about, are you married, have children, are you pregnant, are you planning to get pregnant, do you have childcare? Those all lead to discrimination claims. But you can ask somebody whether they're able to work overtime and travel, sometimes on short notice. You cannot ask what religion someone practices or observes, but you can ask if they're able to work, your required schedule. You cannot ask someone what their maiden name is, but you can ask, have they ever worked or attended school under a different name? Certainly, you should not ask how old someone is, but you can ask if they're over age 18, if that's a job requirement. And you also can ask what are their long-term career goals. You also cannot ask what their native language is, but you can ask if the job requires proficiency in a language other than English. You can ask them about that and whether they can speak it and write fluently. And then you cannot ask, as I said earlier, about what they earn at their current job or even salary history. And that's because that would violate the Massachusetts Pay Equity Act. You can, however, ask, as we discussed, what your salary expectations are. Okay, so now you've interviewed some candidates and you're now evaluating the candidates. So when you're evaluating candidates, best practice is to use the same criteria for evaluating all of them interviewed for the job based on your structured interview. Criteria, for example, I'll just pick a management position in this case. You might look at technical ability, which is the extent to which someone has the skills, knowledge, and experience to actually do the job. Other things that might be important for a management position would be, leadership skills or their internal team skills or problem solving, decision making. If you were, for example, hiring a person in customer service, you want to look at their customer service skills, or that would certainly be on one criteria. If you were looking for a person, for nonprofit human services related kind of job, you want to look at empathy. You want to look at the level of direct care that they provide. All of those, so again, the criteria should really strongly relate back to that job posting that you wrote. In addition, that's okay. In addition, many organizations use assessment tests. For example, one client, a fairly large organization in this case, who hires a lot of direct care staff, conducts an integrity test. And some other organizations will ask for sample work products. Okay. As a final step in the selection process, another best practice is to check references. Now, these days, most organizations have a policy. They will only provide employment verification, but that's still fine. You can do that. And we recommend that you do. On the other hand, sometimes you will get people that will answer, and provide a real reference. In addition, you may also, depending on your organization, want to conduct a background check. And again, that depends on the position, your organization, the type of business that you are. Best practices for checking references, you always want to ask for 3, preferably, from former employers, and preferably also obtained from the supervisor. You always want to ask for permission to conduct the references. This is part of what's on a job application. They're giving you permission to do that. You want to call each reference and confirm employment, job, and performance, and always ask the question, would you rehire the candidate? Would an opening, suitable opening be done? Okay, so let's say now you've identified the most qualified candidate and you're ready to extend an offer. So the typical practice, and we think this is a best practice, is to start with a verbal offer which allows for negotiation before attending, extending a formal written offer. We also, best practice, highly recommend do provide a written offer letter. And the written offer letters serve as an important foundation, should issues later arise. They actually establish the employment relationship. You want to include in the offer letters at-will language, unless there's an employment agreement. That typically only happens at executive levels, though. And at-will employment means that the employee can resign at any time, without reason, for any reason at all. And the company may end the employment at any time for any reason, with or without notice and with or without cause. So that's a very, very important language to include. The acceptance of the offer is not complete until the written offer has been signed by the person hired and the person representing the business. And the signed offer letter should be placed in the new hire's employee file. Best practice offer letter checklist is here. Starts with welcoming language. We're very excited about you joining the offer and making this formal offer. Should include the job title, when the person is starting, whether the position is full-time or part-time, whether it is exempt or non-exempt, and how you're paying them, whether hourly or salary. It should include their standard work hours, to whom the position reports, what the regular pay and eligibility for bonuses, if applicable, required license or certification, if they're required to maintain that to be able to hold that job. Contingencies such as drug testing or fingerprinting or background check. Also deadline for accepting the offer. You don't ever want to make an offer and have it out there for a long time. So, like for an hourly paid position, you might want to give them, 3 days, if, professional, maybe 5, but, I at least have a cap on it. And also an explanation, again, that all employment is at will. In addition, it's also helpful to include with the offer letter, a document we call benefits at a glance. It just gives you a high-level summary of the benefits, and also a list of any information that they're going to need to bring on their first day of employment. For example, information needed to complete Form I-9s, like a license, a social security card, passport, etc. And any other registrations, proof that they of certification or registration.
Pam, Faith has a question. She wants to know, would the offer letter carry COVID language requirements?
Yes, very good idea to include that in the offer letter as well.
And by that, it's whether you require vaccination, whether you require masking, et cetera.
Et cetera. Yep. Yep. That's really important these days. I'm seeing particularly companies that are requiring employees to be fully vaccinated they're putting that into the offer letter. I have not seen necessarily all companies putting in the masking requirements. Some are also including their COVID policy, right as part of their, as one of the pieces of information included in the offer package. So that's another good idea. But I think it's I think it would be a very good practice to put that in. It's very important that people follow that, whatever the policy is. And so I would recommend putting that right in the offer letter, because then you're getting the signage there too from them on the offer letter. Good question, Faith. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So very important part of the process that you want to remember is you got your person, you're bringing them on board, but you also want to make sure that you communicate with those that you interviewed or screened that were not hired. So when you think about those that you interviewed, I think the fact that they gave their time, and interest, to your organization, you want to contact them by phone and let them know they were not selected for hire. And you want to inform the candidate that you've decided to either pursue another candidate or mention what was positive about the interview, if applicable, let them know that they'll, you'll contact them if, similar position, becomes available. And that's a great way, by the way, of also tapping into, potential talent pool for new openings. Candidates phone screen, I would send them a personalized email. For those individuals who submitted an application and or resume, simply an email letting them know that they were not selected for interview along the way. Guidelines, for talking with those that are, were not selected. I think it's just, common sense here. It's really important, to let them know that you appreciated their time, let them know that, and their interest, in your organization. It's never easy to call someone to say, you didn't get the job, but and it can be uncomfortable. Well, just put your uncomfortable stuff aside and, focus on, the individual and let them know in a as graceful and respectful way as possible. Okay. And one more slide, I think here. Yeah. Jim, I'm having trouble. There's maybe I can, okay. Okay. I had something on the screen that was blocking the slides here. Okay, so the final step is probably one of the most key steps in terms of, really retaining now those that you've hired. So there's an abundance of research out there that has shown that when you really properly onboard employees, you want to really, that can significantly impact first of all, a new hire's success, in your job, but also retention. And it's onboarding, I'm telling you, is the time in dollars that you spent on recruiting. Onboarding is just a great way to protect your investment. So an onboarding program, by the way, doesn't have to be expensive. The important thing here is that you have a plan for orienting and training new people and getting them assimilated, into your organization as soon as possible so that they can succeed in the job. So examples of elements of onboarding might include, a schedule for first week events, you get rid of, tackle all the new hire paperwork, review company policies or employee handbook, the history of the company, job shadowing, trainings, etc. You might assign somebody as a person that they can go to, like a buddy, to whom they can go to and ask general questions. You could introduce them to, co-workers, set up meetings with co-workers with whom the new hire will be working with most closely, or taking the new hire out to lunch their first day, or following up and checking in with the new hire after completing 1 week. Here's what we recommend as a best practice: 1 week, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year of service. This is an opportunity, by doing those check-ins, to continuously engage with the new hire, which is essential for retaining. And in those check-ins, you can give them feedback on their job performance. You can ask them about any obstacles, in their way. You can talk about opportunities to learn and grow their skills to perform their job even better. It is absolutely an important way to engage. And you can hear about any problems that they might be facing. So very, very important to do that. There's a lot of evidence, for when you engage like that with hourly workers. If you can get them beyond a year, as I mentioned earlier, you have a better chance of retaining them longer. And, for professional staff, I'm going to say a year is also important. But when you're looking at professional level staff, the timing when people are considering leaving is around that 2.5 to 3 year mark. And so that's when you want to pay attention, to, okay, what are you doing, to retain those individuals? And next slide. Just want to thank all of you for participating in the webinar. It's been very good. And I just want to leave it open for any questions here that you might have. This is my contact information. Feel free to connect with me. My email address is psandy@yourhr@work.com. If you want to send me an email, if you haven't, anyway, if you want to contact me by email. I think questions, Jim, you want to collect any questions, right? That follow?
Yeah, if there are any questions that have not been answered in the course of this discussion, you can email me at jim.danhauser@scorevolunteer.org. And I will quickly just put that into the chat so that everybody has it.
Fabulous.
And then if we have any further questions, now would be the time to speak. And seeing none, Pam, thank you very much for a very comprehensive overview of this area, which is always important, but it seems like every time we talk, it's more important than it was the last time. And we recognize that it's a big problem for large and small businesses. The large businesses get all the news coverage. The small businesses have to deal with it on the ground day after day after day. So we hope this was all helpful information to you, and we look forward to seeing you next time around. So thank you, everybody.
Oh, Jim, can I add one more thing? Because I know we got an earlier question about remote workers and some of the challenges on that.
Yes, sure.
I have we did a how-to guide on that, and anybody who's interested in that, if you could just let Jim know that, I'm happy to send that to you all. It's a very short, what we call our how-to guides about, how to interview them and things like that. Be happy to share that. Just
Awesome.
let you know if you'd like it.
That'd be a great resource for people. Thanks, Pam.
Okay.
Hang on a second. I do see one further question.
Yep.
No, it just says hi.
Hi back.
Bob, if you do have a question. Oh, he does want to get the how guide.
Okay. Be happy to share that with you.
Why don't you send that to me, actually, and then I can circulate it to people.
That would be great. The other thing I wanted to ask for those participating today, does everybody have job applications? If not, we've got a sample one that I'm happy to also share, and I'll send to Jim. So just let Jim know if you want that.
Send those two things to me, and I will simply send it to everybody who attended. And I will, along with the link to the recording.
I'll do that right now, Jim.
Great. Okay, everybody, thanks very much for participating, and we will look forward to hearing more from you next time around. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.